Hello everyone, today I'm going to be walking you through the Tank Legion Mage Tower challenge called the High Lord's Return. So if you have any tank spec at all that you play, this is the challenge you will see. As you can see, I played this challenge on a Guardian Druid with pretty much zero experience of Guardian in the past. So before we jump into any of the actual gameplay or the encounter itself, we're going to take a quick look at the talents I ran. Talent build I ran with, I'm pretty sure came directly from the Wowhead guide for this Mage Tower challenge. Bear in mind I completed this in Dragonflight. It was technically season 1 of Dragonflight. We're now at the time of this video in season 2, so my item level was a bit different, my gear was a little bit different, but in terms of the talents, I think they were pretty much untouched. The main things I went for as a Druid, which do also apply to any of the other specs for this challenge, are to have a good amount of CC, preferably AoE CC, as that is really helpful to deal with the ads. So I have Typhoon as a knockback, and I also have Incessant Tempest to reduce the cooldown of my Typhoon as well. Also have In-Cap Roar as opposed to Mighty Bash. Mighty Bash is single target, which is a stun as well, while In-Cap Roar is an AoE incapacitate, which is useful again against the ads that we have in this encounter. Everything else in the left side in the class tree is kind of basic and doesn't really apply directly to the challenge other than maybe Heart of the Wild, because I actually spend a good amount of time in this challenge as a Moonkin, dealing as much DPS as I can. So if you have talents like that in your class tree for your own class that kind of helps you deal that extra little bit of damage while tanking, you definitely want to do that because you need to be optimizing your DPS as much as possible in this challenge. As for the actual spec tree, speaking of optimizing DPS, I have gone entirely down the Moonfire side of the Guardian tree. So essentially just making my Moonfires do as much damage as possible, making Moonfire buff my melee attacks as well, just trying to squeeze out as much DPS as possible because I knew going into this challenge I had very little experience and I had very suboptimal gear and stats and knowledge, so I just needed as much help as I could get. I will leave this talent import string in the description below if you are a Guardian Druid who wants to take on this challenge yourself, but I hope this just kind of gives you a good general view of the sort of talents you should be taking as a tank for this challenge. The main priorities are AoE CC and optimizing your DPS, and obviously getting some self-sustain in there will also be useful. So now we've taken a look at the talents, we can have a very brief look at the gear. So I've paused the video on my character pane so you can see all of the gear I was wearing, what my current item level was, and my stat balances. Let me just say, I say this in all of my Mage Tower guide videos, this is all just general endgame gear, and even worse, this is mostly just like Moonkin gear, because like I say, I'm not a bear druid at all. I kind of just took my endgame gear, which at the time was quite high level, and ran with it. I put in my Whispering Incarnate icon trinket instead. I have a DPS trinket in there too to kind of help me optimize my DPS, but the rest is just Druid tier, which remember deactivates when you're in the Mage Tower, so the set bonuses don't apply, but the stats still do. And I don't have any specific time walking gear. It doesn't matter too much. I completed this challenge with the wrong gear, very little knowledge of the spec, and just giving it a couple of goes. So if I can do it, I believe you can too. So let's get into the actual encounter, and you'll see that you have a few seconds at the start to buff yourself up, because I believe once the first boss spawns, you kind of have to engage in combat straight away because he like automatically aggroes. So here we go. You start in phase 1 fighting Inquisitor Varys, and you kind of want to DPS him down as fast as possible. So I'm starting off with Moonkin form, and you can see this puddle around the boss. That's gonna give me an Aura of Decay, which is the stacking debuff you can see up here. I'm gonna stay in this ring until roughly 5 stacks, and then move out and hopefully try and let those stacks reset. Those stacks will reduce your max HP, so you don't want to stay in there too long, but if you have more experience or better gear and you think you can survive a bit longer, you can go with higher stacks if you want to. Mind Rend is just his filler mechanic, so just ignore this. You don't really need to use a defensive. Please don't use your interrupt on this. You need to save it for his Drain Life cast. A Smoldering Infernal has spawned, and they are just going to fixate you, and then when they're in melee range of you, they're going to cast a shockwave, and if you get hit by the shockwave, you'll be knocked pretty far back. So sidestep the shockwave, kite the infernal itself, and if you do get knocked back, be ready with a movement ability to recover, and be wary that you can also use a goblin glider if your class has like very limited movement or if it's on cooldown for some reason. These nether horrors have spawned in. They spawn around the sides of the room, so you need to make sure you draw aggro of them immediately so that they don't target your other party members, because you need to keep them alive during this encounter. They need to be focused down almost as like the highest priority in this entire encounter in both phase 1 and 2. They have a nether storm cast that they will each cast at the same time. That's going to be a wipe pretty much if you let those casts go off, so this is where an AoE CC like my in-cap roar is going to come in very handy. And they go down pretty easy with some AoE and like some cleave. So the second phase is starting, and I'm just going to pause it quickly. When you go into phase 2, which happens when Varys dies or reaches 0% HP, I don't know if he technically dies, but however many infernals you had in phase 1 will carry over into phase 2, because even if you DPS the infernals down, they never die. When they reach 0% HP, they will deactivate for a little while and then like rebuild and then come back into the fight with 100% health again. And the longer you stay in phase 1, so the longer it takes you to kill Varys, the more infernals you'll have to deal with in phase 2, which is not optimal. So you do need to be optimizing your DPS as much as possible. Just remember that in P2, you're going to carry on with the Smoldering Infernals. They'll have the same abilities, you'll have to manage them the same way, and you will still get the Nether Horrors. There was a couple of mechanics we missed in P1, because actually we managed to get through P1 fairly quickly, which was good. The only other thing I think that needs to be brought up is these Tormenting Eyes. These eyes will cast a beam on you, which is pretty hard to miss. And when they're casting, if you know the cast is going to go off, you need to face the eye, because if you're faced away from it, it's going to knock you back, same way as the Infernals will. So watch for where they're spawning, look at them as they're casting, and you can snipe them with one hit and they should die. So luckily for me, again, because I'm spec'd into lots of Moonfire damage, I just kind of, as you can see, hit the eye. Okay, it didn't go in one hit, but you can see how easily it dies. That's pretty like low priority, but you do just want to get rid of them since they die nice and easily. And as you can see, they do spawn pretty frequently around the sides of the room, but you should only ever get one at a time. That orb I just stepped into that caused that wave, almost like the Halo ability from Priests, that's from Velen, who is one of the NPCs in this fight that you need to protect. He will put down those orbs, which you can use during the encounter to heal yourself to full, and it will also blind any of the currently active demons that you're fighting. So be wary of those and where they are, and be ready to run to one if you need to. You know, if you've maybe taken a big hit of damage and you're struggling to recover, or if you need some extra CC because something's on cooldown, keep an eye on where they are and position yourself accordingly. Here you can see one of the Infernals is rebuilding, so I currently can't attack it and it's not attacking me, but it's going to come back into the fight in a few seconds and we're going to have to DPS it back down again. So now we're going to go into phase 2 as we did before. I had to rewind. Cruel comes down. Now these beams are going to travel across from the edges of the platform and cross through the middle. If you hit them, they will knock you back or like continuously push you until you get out of their way. So the way I dealt with this is by doing the rest of this encounter around the edge of the platform. That way it's easier to dodge the beams. Cruel will target you and jump to your location like he just did and leave a pool on the ground. You need to step out of that as soon as possible. He's also annihilated me, which has left a debuff. I think he may be about to cast another one. Here it goes. Annihilate is the biggest damage mechanic in this fight, and this is where you need to rotate your defensives accordingly. Each Annihilate will cast a 110% increased damage debuff to you that stacks. So each time he casts the Annihilate, it will do more damage to you. So towards the end of the fight, you will probably need to stack defensives on top of each other to survive. Don't try and interrupt the Annihilate because he will recast it after you kick it, so don't worry, just use defensives instead, you just have to take the hit. Interrupt Twisted Reflections at all costs. If Twisted Reflections goes off, any melee damage you deal to him will heal him until the buff expires. And like I say, the rest of the encounter is pretty simple. You can see me panicking here. Grab an orb, blind all my demons. You still want to focus down the Nether Horrors, don't ignore them because you will wipe if you ignore them. As you can see, the Annihilate start to hurt. I'm now at 4 stacks. And I've managed to kind of evade the Infernal this whole time, again by kiting around the edge of the room. It's never really been able to get to me quick enough. And that is the end of the encounter. That was a messy attempt from me, like I say, because I have very little experience as a bear druid. I'm sure any people who, you know, maybe main tanks or have at least some experience as a tank will have a better time than I did. But just goes to show you that it doesn't matter how much experience you have. If you give it a couple of tries, even with suboptimal gear, you can do it, I believe. So there you have it. I hope that helped you figure out how to face the High Lord's Return as a tank. I appreciate you watching. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to give a like and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more. Thank you so much for watching. I wish you the very best of luck for the Tank Mage Tower challenge, and I hope to see you again very, very soon. Bye!